the biggest thing is like AI and tools, they really create leverage in execution layers. Content production, ad variations, data analysis, like initial research is really where it creates something that can be turned into leverage, right? It's anything that's repetitive, but not necessarily like super important.
Today's guest is Connor. He's growth director at Biggar. He has spent the last few years working across UX and product and growth, and more recently leading how their teams rethink modern growth. Connor, I'm really excited to have you here.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. Couldn't be more stoked.
So to start simple, like how would you describe your role as growth director today? What does growth actually mean in your world at Big Red Jelly?
Yeah, it's a really great question. What I like to start with is a quick overview of Big Red Jelly, because I think it gives some really good context to, what I'm about to say about my role. But Big Red Jelly, we are a digital marketing agency. And at Big Red Jelly, the way we describe growth is very intentional. It actually more talks about like the order of doing the right things rather than just being a more specific like SEO or ads agency. So as growth director, my role is to make sure our clients aren't just doing marketing. They're not just doing SEO and ads. They're building marketing processes that they can rely on to compound and be repeatable. So, as we talk about that Big Red Jelly, we're industry agnostic. And so, rather than building specifically into, a niche or into like the health and wellness space or e-commerce, it's been a really cool challenge to be able to build processes that we can repeat for any client across different industries. So to kind of separate that growth to us and my role as growth director is less about the traffic, the followers, leads in isolation. It's building that system that turns attention into revenue.
That's so cool. That you described it in a very simple way, but very smart way. Very cool. I love that description.
Thank you. Thank you.
One thing that stood out to me is that you have recently shifted from a one strategist model to a more of a fractional growth team. So with that shift to more specialized roles, ads, SEO, CRM, what has actually improved in terms of results or execution?
Yeah. So as you talk about that, just kind of some background to anybody listening. Our grow team has shifted from a more consultant-based strategist kind of role for each one of our strategists, where they were really kind of overseeing the overall strategy and then actually working into the execution. We've now shifted to, a more traditional model that agencies follow. Ads, SEO, email, conversion rate optimization, like you said. In that previous model that we had, we did see a lot of benefit from it, but in now making the shift, we really can operate as you put it, like a fractional growth team. You have your dedicated account manager who again kind of follows that more traditional management role or account management role that you see with a lot of agencies. But now you also have your SEO, CRM, web, all working together under the supervision of that account manager and their strategy. And so it's been really cool for us because it's really key in who we hire in those seats. But it's been really cool that taking our background and what we came from, how we're now able to kind of change that traditional model. Who we do hire for those account manager roles does kind of mimic that old model that we followed, where that account manager is a digital marketing strategist, right? And they oversee the strategy and they oversee that. It's just now we're adding those additional seats behind them to help support them. And so, some results that we've seen from it is, instead of one person being pretty decent at everything, you really do get that team. And it's been very intentional for us to do that. We see bigger growth for our clients. They feel like they have more support on that front. And, for some people listening, they may say like, yeah, that's the traditional model that a lot of agencies follow. But, for us, it's like our team went through that model that we had before. And now everybody's more empowered because they see the end-to-end journey of a client or, their ideal client, and understanding how that role really dives into it. It gives much more intention to our leaders and our managers here at Big Red Jelly. And so, we're going a more traditional route. It is more beneficial for the client, but our background that brought us here, I think, really drives the results that we see.
That's so interesting. And you talk a lot about growth not coming from random tactics, but from a repeatable process. So why do you think so many teams still default to tactics first?
Yeah, I think it's because it's the attractive part of it, right? Like you are working with a very typical SEO agency or an ads agency, and the KPIs or things that they're going to be reporting on are always very attractive. How many website visitors did I get? How many clicks to the ad? How many conversions did I get from the ad? But I think the one thing that sets us apart is, we're worried about the whole ideal client journey, right? And, as we look at that, we're really trying to build, that repeatable process, but also a revenue driving machine. One thing that I like to point out as we talk about this is, at Big Red Jelly, we practice what we preach. For 5 years, our biggest, new client source was our past clients. And, that kind of speaks to like, hey, with this, we're looking at everything very holistically, from your first touch point with your ideal client to your last and when they're becoming a promoter for your brand. And with all those different parts, we're able to see that. And we really want to drive, average order values and customer lifetime value up, apart from just seeing that really attractive, hey, I got more clicks on my ad, or I got more clicks to my website. We want to know what happens to that client down the line. And so, to answer your question, coming back to that, I kind of went on a tangent there. But to answer your question, I think why a lot of people, go towards the more just attractive models of, hey, we're an SEO agency and we report on this. It's because it is, a lot easier to some extent. You don't have to worry about the email that somebody gets after they click and after they land and when they come back.
Yeah. And you talk about this structured process from brand all the way to growth. Can you walk me through it, and where do teams usually rush or skip steps?
Yeah. It's a really good question. And to kind of preface, our tagline here at Big Red Jelly is brand, build, grow, right? Brand, your positioning, your messaging, who you actually serve. Build is your website, your funnel, and your infrastructure.
Yeah.
And then your grow is kind of activating all of those, right? And so everything from ads, SEO, email, social, everything across the board. And what does that campaign look like? Now, as we talk about that framework, what makes it super functional for our process and what really sets it apart from the traditional route people take, and where we see people miss is they always want to dive into, again, going back to like those attractive numbers. I got my website up, I got my brand created, I am ready to get my first customer, right? Like that is the number one thing we hear. Hey, I want to run ads, right? And where a lot of people miss is like, okay, yeah, that's great. You can go dump, 10K, 20K into Meta ads or Google ads, but do you know who you're talking to and why that message works, right? Like, is the message actually going to resonate with them at where they're at in the buyer's journey? And so, that's the biggest mistake that I see. A lot of times people will have an ad running and it's like, hey, buy this now, buy that now. And it's like, hey, you're targeting somebody at a very informational stage of the buyer's journey, especially on the platform that you're running ads on. Maybe we should change the call to action. Maybe they need to be nurtured a little bit more. And so that's the number one mistake, to answer your question, that we see. And, our process allows us to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, what does this whole campaign look like from start to finish? And why should we have what messaging where? But to answer your question, everybody always jumps into, I want to spend money on ads. I just want to give Google my money. And it always amazes me.
But it sounds like you have really perfected this method that you guys are using.
Yeah, I think to some extent, I think there's always challenges that come with it, product market fit. What does the sales process look like on the client's end? For service-based businesses, how well do they answer the phone? What is their close rate on their end? But yeah, I would say that it really has allowed us to continue to be industry agnostic and, continue to work with bigger brands or brands that we may not have had as much insight in the past, but at least we have that process to fall back on. The process itself is agnostic.
And a lot of teams right now are going, straight into tools and ads and AI, but without that strong, foundation that you talked about. So what do you typically see happen when they do that?
Yeah. It is a huge thing right now. You have like the AI boom that's happening currently. And now suddenly your average CEO that's been running his roofing company for 10 years is now a marketing genius because he's talked to ChatGPT once or twice, right? And it's something that we see, what you do end up getting when you have that, when you're jumping into tools and AI without that foundation, is you will get activity, you just won't get the outcome, or you won't get a strong outcome that is repeatable or that gives you the data that you need to grow. They'll try AI, but it just creates more noise. You see that across the board now. It's like there's so much noise out there, and you really don't have something that differentiates you from the other roofing company that's using AI. So to summarize, it feels like progress, but there's some of those beautiful numbers of, hey, I'm getting more impressions, but it's like there's no real traction. It's actually slowing you down, and it's not making anything work together. It's not cohesive.
And speaking of all the noise that is going on right now in this world, I mean, there's obviously a lot of noise, around AI. So how do you personally cut through that and decide what's actually useful versus what's just hype?
Yeah. It's it's the question on a lot of people's minds right now. We look at AI through one lens. Does it improve speed, clarity, output quality in an already existing real foundational workflow? One practice that we like to do is, as we're talking about a team's sales strategy after somebody has come to them, it needs to be consistent with the marketing that we're doing. We call this marketing, where it's like, hey, we're here to drive revenue, not just drive, those beautiful numbers that we talked about previously. But if it doesn't plug into something that is already working well, strategy, content, ads, your CRM, it's probably a distraction, right? It's probably just that noise. So, we're not just trying to use AI for the sake of it. We're using it to remove friction from a proven process already, and that process that's applied to, your everyday client.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's crazy and it's scary, it's overwhelming. So I'm always curious about how other, agencies and teams are handling that, and has it been challenging? I mean, it's crazy
Yeah.
times we're living.
The AI fatigue is, I mean, it's real, right? Like people don't know what to use it for, and they don't know where they're going with it. It's just like people are in a testing phase, and it's crazy to see. It's crazy to be a part of.
It's crazy to be a part of it. I always think about that. Like, I feel like I'm living a piece of history, you know. My children are gonna speak to me and like, wow, you were alive, you know, when AI was created. Like,
Right, like we're pioneering it right now. It's like when the internet first started, right? You have some people that listen to it and think it's a trend, or people that think it's a trend, right? You're like, hey, I'm going to jump on this now and start to learn, or I think it's a fad and it's going to go away.
yeah.
You know, what do I do with it?
And you mentioned this idea of AI fatigue. I mean, what does that look like in the teams you're working with right now? I mean, how do you come up with that?
Yeah. I mean, AI fatigue, it shows up as, overwhelming and frankly like inconsistency, right? It's like teams are trying, five different tools, rewriting things three times, second guessing outputs, and honestly, like it's just burning time, right? Like that is what the fatigue is showing up for a lot of teams.
Yeah.
So, there's also this pressure to like use AI even when it's not needed. And that's what a lot of people are seeing is like, Coca-Cola put out an ad that they got some backlash on because they're like, hey, was AI even needed for this? It was like an animated truck, driving through, the snow. And then there was like this clearly AI bird that was there. And it's like, was that bird even needed to get the point across about the ad? And so, what we're seeing a lot in this AI fatigue is less clarity, not more. It's just like adding to the noise and really just being overwhelming to even, end consumers. And so, to kind of expand on that, the biggest thing is like AI and tools, they really create leverage in execution layers, right? Content production, ad variations, data analysis, like initial research is really where it creates something that can be turned into leverage, right? It's anything that's repetitive but not necessarily like super important. And the way I look at it across our teams right now is actually the first practice that we did is we took a pen and paper and we said, what are things that take the most amount of time for you right now, and how could we use AI to leverage that, but also not cripple any type of design or creativity that you have across those. And the results were amazing. It was like, yeah, I mean, I could use it to compile research that I've done across these different tools and really just put together my thinking on paper, where it doesn't hinder that creativity, but it just makes my life easier, right? Like that is the starting point that we're at right now. We're still in the middle of building these processes.
And as AI takes over more execution, where do you think the human element matters more than ever in growth?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. I think that AI will continue to make execution easier, right?
Yeah.
The differentiation shifts to the overall thinking, and the overall strategy. Somebody said this at a past event that Big Red Jelly did. They said, volume is not the issue now, right? And how quickly you can get it done. We're going to see more and more clients saying like, hey, I could do this yesterday with it. It may not be as good because I don't have the overall strategy and thinking behind it, but like I could have done this yesterday. Like what's taking so much time? And so I think that personally we're going back to a time like in the 70s, 80s, and 90s where, in advertising, anybody could print something, anybody could have a billboard up, that is no longer a differentiator. The tools that we use, the being a Google Ads expert will no longer be a differentiator. It's the overall strategy and the campaign that you're running. So, the biggest takeaway is like AI scales what you already are. So if you have like the clarity, the direction, the strategy, it just amplifies it. Similar to that use case that I used in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Somebody on our team worked in New York during the 80s and 90s when traditional advertising was like at its height. Yeah. And, he used a great example that I always reference in trainings, where he was doing a campaign for an underwear company. And, middle of New York, he's like, hey, the channels that we can use are billboards and their signs, right? Like, that's what everybody's doing. And the thing he ended up going with was actually, I'm going to put stickers on the concrete that point to the store and have catchy phrases on them. It's something that differentiates from the noise, and people are looking down. And he said, like, the first one was like, hey, nice underwear on the concrete. And they're like, who put this sticker here? It's very on brand, but it's like, I think that creative campaign and kind of thinking outside the box is what really is going to come out of this AI boom. And I couldn't be more excited for it, because like, that's what I studied. That's what I love, is that creative campaign strategy. Because now it's like everything is doable by anybody. Anybody can go run a Google ad now, or a Meta ad. AI is making it easier to do that.
Yeah. God, that's such a cool perspective. I feel
Thank you.
It can be very scary. So I love hearing perspectives like that.
Yeah, it's something that we're focusing on a lot here at Big Red Jelly. We call it innovate or die. Now, that's kind of scary, like, innovate or die. Really what we mean as like Big Red Jelly as a whole is we need to continue to innovate and be at the top of that innovation, whether that just be like a quarterly meeting to come together and say, hey, what is going on? What have people tried? One thing that I've heard a lot of neighboring companies or agencies or private companies where you have a marketer that's just, they market that company, is I think that leadership is starting to hinder people's AI abilities and learning. They're trying to build these like really complex processes about it, and they don't even know what it is yet, right? Like, we're starting with, hey, let's just explore, right? Like we obviously have our sandboxes and our safe places to do that. We're obviously not doing a majority of our exploration with, live clients, but it's like, we really emphasize like, go and explore, like just go and test. And if anybody brings up something cool, that's what we add into our processes. And that's what we come together with on our Innovate or Die meetings.
I love that. Innovate or die. I love it.
Yeah. Well, kind of intense, but
yeah, but I love it. I love it. It's very passionate.
Yeah, it is. It is.
This has been such a great conversation, Connor. I really appreciate you breaking all of this down in such a clear and honest way. I feel like there's so much here that I think people can actually take and apply, which is always the goal. So thank you again for taking the time to join us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I love these conversations. It's the funnest thing. I think it's just like, listen to people who are in the industry and like practicing these things, right? And so thanks again for having me. This was great.